final session of this event, the Multiplication and Discipleship event here held on the campus of Anderson University. And in this final session, we're going to talk about what I'd like to call moving from the land of talk to the land of do. My name is David Culp. I'm the lead pastor in St. Joe, Michigan, Church of God congregation. Been there for about 17 years, grew up in the Church of God, multiple generations of the Church of God. And we're a multi-site congregation, small town setting. We've got four campuses, and just God's doing some amazing things. And some of what has been helpful to us is a process that, again, helps you move from the land of talk to the land of do. We, over the last few sessions, and if you've missed any of the sessions, you can go back on the YouTube channel and find some of those other sessions, where there's been some great content, just talking about multiplication, discipleship. And now we want to take some of those ideas and think about how can we move again from the land of talk to the land of do. So I got my start in ministry as a senior pastor, a lead pastor in Ohio. I followed Pastor Vernon Maddox. Vernon Maddox, just a great pastor, allowed me to have a lot of opportunities for ministry, poured into me, encouraged me, led me as a young pastor. And then at 29, I don't know what the church was thinking, but they asked me, after Pastor Maddox had gone on to be the state pastor in Ohio, they'd asked me to be the lead pastor. And really at 29 got just thrown into the deep end of the pool. And there were two gentlemen in the church. They had been corporate executives. One was Charlie Burkholtz, David Alexander. David Alexander was a VP at AK Steel, which was a steel mill in the community where we were at. And they took me under their wing and really helped me, taught me about change management, leadership principles. And one of the things that David Alexander used to say all the time, we need to move from the land of talk to the land of do. I love what 1 Chronicles chapter 12, verse 32 says, and it says this: from the tribe of Issachar, there were 200 leaders of the tribe with their relatives, and all these men understood the signs of the times and knew the best course of action to take. So they understood the time and they understood the action to take. So in essence, they knew what it would look like to move from the land of talk. They were thinking about it. They had understood it. So that's the land of talk, trying to understand what's going on. But then they knew what to do. So it's really getting to the point of action. So I'm going to share some things over the next few minutes that for us in our context has been helpful, a process that's been helpful to move us from the land of talk to the land of do. And you think of this, this one of the ways you could implement some of what we're going to talk about is you could do it in a small group of some leaders that you have, whether that's staff or lay leaders, whatever. But you can also take, and a lot of it will apply to that, but a lot of it too will apply if you're just on your own, in your study, and if you work kind of through this process, you can do a lot of this just on your own if that's what you need to do in the moment. But just think about, chew the meat, spit out the bones, love to say that, and what's going to apply to, again, just give you some tools to help us move from the land of talk to the land of do. Simon Sinek wrote a book, Start With Why. And I think it's always important for us to start with why. Why do we need to move from the land of talk to the land of do? And I just want to remind us of the culture, the context of where we are in this moment as in this world, in our generation. You have just the context of the rise of the nuns. People are walking away from the church. People are going to, and especially young people are absolutely, walking away. You look at all the things that are going on in this divisive political landscape that we live in. I mean, how hard it is for pastors and churches try to navigate that. And we're coming into an election season, and don't even get me started with pastors who are making all of us look bad as they get more excited about the latest social media fueled issue of the day than really loving Jesus and shepherding what it looks like to represent Him in our world. And then you've got all the mental health issues in pews and in congregations and in pastors, and cultural shifts that are impacting the church as the societal changes are coming into conflict with the traditional Orthodox teaching of the church. And then we live in this age that is getting, all these things together, it's getting more and more complex. And you think about COVID and all of us, all the things that changed and the reset in the church, and you put all of that into this mix, and it's this whirlwind, and what should we do? Gone are the days when it was just natural that the church or clergy would just get a pass, and people would look to them and look to the church as a source of the place you could trust. I mean, all that is gone. All that landscape is gone. So we cannot afford to take the tired forms of past generations and expect that those are going to work in the generation that we find ourselves in today. So what is the still small voice of the Spirit saying to us? Again, we've had a lot of great sessions, and we've talked, and we've wrestled with some big concepts. But again, how can we move from the land of talk to the land of do? Because we cannot just go back and think that we can just use these tired forms and think that if we do the same things we've always done, that we're going to get different results than we're currently getting, as the church is just not moving in so many places in a good direction. So what do we do? What do we do when we understand that 1985 is not coming back, 1965 is not coming back? So what's going to happen? What's going to work in the context that we find ourselves in today, in this wilderness of complexity? I love what Daniel Boone, frontiersman, said. When you're lost in the wilderness, bewildered, no fixed plan will do. You must think, act, and learn your way to safety. So as we think about that, and how does that relate to what we're talking about, we have to figure out, with the help of the Holy Spirit and the still small voice of the Spirit, the direction of Christ, who is head of the church. God, where do you want us to go? What's in this season? What are you teaching us? What do we need to learn to move us forward? To, again, think about what Daniel Boone said, because it's a complex wilderness that we're in, and we have to, for the sake of the gospel, do the hard work of trying to discern that still small voice, so that we can be like Paul, who became all things to all men, so that some people, different people, could be saved. When you think about the church, it's a living organism. It's a body. Warren Burke said this. He said, living systems that survive do so because they mutate. That is, they adapt to the changing forces in their respective environments. So again, in this final session, to think about all that's going on, and how do we need to change? How do we need to mutate? How do we need to adapt into the current landscape that we're in? So again, to take what the men of Issachar said, to understand our times so that we would know what to do. And so I would propose that we use some tools. I mean, you use tools in all different areas of your life. They're helpful. They help us to do things just on our own we might not be able to do, whether that's a screwdriver, or whether that's a hammer, or whether that's some power tool that really helps us to do something. And what I would say is strategic thinking, that's moving from the land of talk to the land of do. It's a tool to help us to just give God the space, the Holy Spirit the space to discern the voice. We just want to give God the opportunity to speak to us. Any pastor can sit and do, again, what they've always done, hoping to get different results. It really, as we think about that, if we want to be faithful to our God, to the one who's called us into this work, then we need to do the difficult work. It's easy to stay in the land of talk. Just, again, to do what we've always done. I remember when I was a young pastor, my first assignment out in Oklahoma, and the senior pastor, he was getting close to retirement. Great guy, loved him, but I remember him saying to me, you know what, I don't want to do anything new because I'm getting too close to retirement, and so I don't want the new guy to have to clean up, my messes that that I start that I'm not going to finish. And I thought, you know what, and I couldn't stay in that environment. I can't for a single year or whatever it was, or 2 years till he was gone. I can't just sit around and just do what has always been done. The gospel is too important. The mission of the church is too important. The call is too vibrant from our master to sit on our hands and just hope that it gets better. And so I want to listen well. I want to use whatever tool at my disposal to give God, give the Spirit, give Jesus, the head of the church, an opportunity to speak to me, to do the work so that He can speak. And so as we think about strategic thinking, this is what Merlin Schweitzer said on the subject, and it's just a definition for us. He wrote, strategic thinking involves looking at emerging trends, identifying whether or not they represent opportunities or threats to the organization, and developing an organizational response to take advantage of the potential opportunity to mitigate the threat. So all that said is, strategic thinking is just looking at the landscape, what's going on, and trying to discern what's the next step. What do we need to do? What do we need to adapt? As Daniel Boone said, how do we move our way out of this wilderness that we find ourselves in? And so, because I'm a preacher, I'm going to use some alliteration, and so I'm going to talk to you. And if you want to take some notes, I would encourage you to do that, because we're going to give some tools, and you can go back and hopefully this will be helpful to you. But I'm going to want to share the 4 R's of discovering the land of do. And so let me just define them real quick, and then we'll break them kind of open a little bit. But here are the 4 R's. The first would be, first step, again, trying to move from land of talk to land of do. The first R I would just throw out as recognizing. And that's the step where you do some scanning. You just kind of think about what's the current state that we find ourselves in? What's the world that we find ourselves in? Where's the community what's the context that God has me in? The church, what's going on. So again, like the men of Issachar, they understood the times that they lived in. And so how can we do the prayerful, difficult work to go and just kind of look around? To recognize what's happening. The second R would be, again, discovering the land of do. The second R would be resolving. So that's the step where you work to identify the elements of the vision that God has for the church that's going to move it forward. The gravitational pull of the church will always be to be inwardly focused, to just think about ourselves, to do what we've always done, to just make the people that are showing up every week happy. Lost people don't typically call and complain. It's the people that are far from God. They're not calling you up, wondering why you're not doing stuff for them. It's the people in the pews we have to deal with. But again, as we think about moving to the land of do, we've been called to go into the world and to make disciples. And so what do we need to resolve to resist that gravitational pull, to just be inwardly focused? What's the vision of the church that will help the church in this next ministry season? What's the compelling kingdom expression where we can really become and to live out God's ideal for us in this season? So that's the resolving stage. And then the next stage would be reacting. So, and that's the stage, again, move from land of talk to the land of do, where we get together an executable plan. How can we actually do it? Not just copy what someone else is doing. There's nothing wrong with looking around and getting ideas. As I said in the earlier panel, I've never had an original idea myself, and so you love to look around, love to see what other people are doing, because that inspires you to think about what could be in your own context. But what we really have to discern, what's the unique thing, God, that you want us to do in our ministry context? And so you resolve to figure that out and then react. You begin to put some action items into the mix so you can actually execute on that plan. And then the last step would be where you go to refocus. And that, a lot of times we stop, if we get through the process this far, we stop right here and we don't do that refocus. And refocus is where you do some evaluation, you're holding people accountable. Again, you get tired after these first 3 steps sometimes, and you don't do that final piece of the work of going back and refocusing and calling people out and how are we doing on that and where are we at and holding people accountable. And even going back and thinking about, okay, we really felt like that was where God wanted us in that moment. Is that still, God, where you want us to be? And so that's an ongoing conversation. And so this last step is that ongoing conversation with God to say, hey, is this still where you're at? So let's jump in then to step 1 and to think about recognizing as we begin moving from land of talk to the land of do. So what's what's this process? What's it look like for us to discover? And as I said, you can either do this with a team of people, maybe that's some staff, maybe that's some lay people, depending on the context of your church. I would suggest no more than 6 to 12 people. But if it's you just need to do this some work, you and the Lord, just one-on-one. Just think about how you can apply this. Chew the meat, spit out the bones. How you can apply it again in your context. Maybe it's just you and the Lord together. But so whatever. Just think about how this applies. So let's think about this first step of recognizing again, to clearly understand where you are, and to understand where you are and where you need to go. Sometimes the best place to start is to go back and think about the history. So what is the history of the church? What would the community say about your congregation? What are people as they think about your church? What are the former pastors? If maybe you talk to them, what do they say about the congregation as they serve the congregation? And here's one of the ways that we have done this practically in our context, was just to ask the question. If we look, and our church is 110, 115 years old now. If we were to look over that all of those years of ministry, what would be the front page newspaper articles? If they were ever written about our church, what would be those newspaper articles? One of those would be in around 1919 or so. Our church is in southwest Michigan, right on Lake Michigan. And if you've never been to Michigan, it gets very cold in Michigan. And sometimes, not the whole lake, but a lot of the lake will freeze over depending on how cold it is. And there were some people that had come to Christ in January in our church. The year was 1919. And so the church decided to have a baptismal service. These people were so excited about getting baptized that in January in Michigan, with ice on the lake, they go out onto the ice, they chip holes in the ice, and they're baptizing people in Lake Michigan. Now that's some committed folk you're really wanting to be baptized, have a high value of baptism, and we Church of God, we love baptism. So the newspaper, and we literally have this newspaper article. The article that appeared in the newspaper is what happened as people were out on the ice. The ice broke. And the newspaper article is about how they had to rescue people out of Lake Michigan at the Church of God's baptismal service. So that literally is one of the newspaper stories from our history. But that says some things. That reminds us that this church, from its inception, had this high value of reaching people for Christ, of calling them to take that next step in their walk with Christ. Our church started the first 40 years or so. It was made up of German immigrants, Eastern European immigrants that had come and settled in this area. And so until the 40s, all the services were in German. That's a part of our history. As the church grew, the ones that started the church, they built with their own hands literally the brick that became the first building. That 3-story building, they built it themselves. The 3rd story, and you can go back into the archives of the Church of God, and there's stories where it talks about the first church in St. Joe, and the 3rd story was dedicated to missionaries coming off the field. It was called Missions Home. Faith Missions Home. That was they could come and they could convalesce on the shores of Lake Michigan. Missionary. So baked into the DNA of our congregation is this heartbeat for world mission. That's who we've been. And as we had our first pastor that was a non-German speaking pastor, that decision was made. The people they all spoke German. So to make the decision to not continue having services in German was a conscious decision. These people made and we stand on their shoulders. They were making the decision that if we're going to continue to reach people for Christ in this community, and beyond just the people that are like us, then we've got to have services in English. And so they made that decision. They were in an era where churches weren't having multiple services. Everybody thought, the way that Jesus did church is everybody was in the same room at the same hour, singing the same songs, listening to the same message from the same preacher, because that's the way Jesus did it. But they had, the king, the head of the church, Christ, imparted something different in them, and they started having multiple services way back before other people were having multiple services. So those things are in the DNA. The pivot that we made several years ago to become a church not just focused inwardly, but to focus outwardly into our community. All those things play in. So to think about your history, to go back and as you're recognizing, to think about history. And then the second thing, a word that preachers use is exegesis. And so to do some community exegesis, that word to exegete, when you exegete a text as a pastor, you seek to understand it. You seek to remove the mystery of the text. So do you understand? Do we understand the context, the community that we live in, and to exegete the community, to understand the demographics, to do a demographic study of the people? The census is a great resource. And you can look at the census tracts. What are the census tracts? This book I carry around with me everywhere. And in here, these are all the census tracts, and it has the demographic data broken down by the different census tracts of the county that I live in. I want to know the people that I'm trying to serve. We need to not just be in our churches and think that we know the people, but we need to get out and understand the people. So to read the local newspaper, to talk to people that are around us in the community, both inside and outside the church. Is one of the things that we do in our context is we have 4 campuses, and so one of the campuses is in a really under-resourced area, and so we do community dinners. And we just ask people, what would make this community a better place? How can we come alongside you? How can we bless you? We've knocked on every door of the community asking those kind of questions. So again, how can we seek to know the history and then to exegete the community so we understand who it is, the demographics of the people that God has called us to reach? And one of the things that we found out as we knocked on those doors in that under-resourced community was people started just talking about, access to laundry was something that there's no laundromat in that community. In that under-resourced area, one of the that has the highest mortality rate, one of the highest mortality rates in census tract 22 and 23 in Michigan, highest mortality rates in Michigan. A lot of poverty, a lot of people living under the poverty threshold, all those things. And there's a lot of slumlords in that area, a lot of homes that they don't have washers and dryers that are up to speed, whatever. There's well water, a lot of those homes. As we talk to people and listen to people's stories, people telling stories about how they were doing the laundry for their children and put it in and hanging them or drying them in the ovens, and to think about how can we come alongside people? How can we help people? That's a need. And so you get that when you listen and you understand maybe God, what are you doing as we listen to people and we understand and exegete the community that God has us in. Another thing that I think that we need to do as we think about this process of just kind of looking around at what's happening is to what I would call to identify the irreducible complexity of the gospel. Michael Behe, he's a biochemist, and won't get into why he kind of coined the term irreducible complexity, but I just love the idea that there are some things in life that are irreducibly complex. A simple example is a mousetrap. If you think about a mousetrap, and if you imagine if I'm holding a mousetrap, and you think about the different pieces of a mousetrap, you got the base, you got the spring, you got the place to put the cheese, you've got all these different pieces, and think about if you took any of those pieces away, how effective the mousetrap would be. It ceases to be a mousetrap the moment that you take the thing that is the bait that attracts the mouse, or you take the arm, or you take the spring, or you take the base that it's all attached to. At any of those things are taken away, it's as a system, it's irreducibly complex. And what I would throw out to us is, as we think about, God, what are you doing? Is it to think about how is, in our context, the gospel irreducibly complex? What are the basic things in the gospel, that we're doing, that we've been called to, that if we're going to be the church that honors Jesus and does it Jesus' way, that we have to do that thing, whatever that thing is. And so there's some texts. I would encourage you to study these texts. So what's in Matthew 28, 18 through 20? What's that say? What's the Great Commission say? What's the Great Commandment say? What does Acts 2, the end of Acts 2, where it talks about what's going on, 42 through 46, talks about what's going on in the early church. What are the things that they were doing that we need to do in our context? What does Luke 15, the story, 3 stories of the lost coin and the lost sheep and the lost son, what do those stories, what do they say about what Jesus wants us to do? Again, as He is head of the church, what is the irreducible complexity of the church? And for us, as we thought about that, there's 3 buckets that we've reduced it down to for us in our context. Is you got to be worshiping, you got to be serving, and you got to be discipling or growing people in their faith. And you can't take any of those 3 things away and still, I don't think, in the context I'm in, to be doing the things that Jesus called us to do. Now, you can add things to that, but that's irreducibly complex. And there's a lot of different ways to think about that, and there's different ways to say it. But because later I would want us to use this and to think about. As we think about, do some strategic planning to use that then in the next step. So you need to think about it. You need to think, as you're thinking about this first step, to think about what is the irreducible complexity. Another thing that I would suggest that you do would be just an analysis, and if you've come maybe from the business world or you've been around strategic planning or whatever, a SWOT analysis is something pretty common. If you've, again, hung out in the business world at all. And the SWOT analysis, very simply, is just to think about the strengths, the weaknesses, the opportunities, and the potential threats. And so just to do that for the church, to just, again, as another thing to do is you're kind of just looking around at, just recognizing what's happening in your context. So and so just kind of go through that really super quick. So what are the strengths to consider? What's going well in your context? And you can just write these up, or if you're doing it by yourself, just kind of write them down, think about what's going currently well, what's adding value, what's adding kingdom value for you. What are the things that you're known for in the community? You can go back to the history thing you did earlier, maybe pull some of that things in, just kind of thinking about, and again, giving the Spirit space to speak to you about what's happening in your context. So the next thing would be weaknesses, what's not going so well, what needs to be improved, what's taking energy and resources, but there's very little that you're getting of value in return for that. And in the church, we love to start new things. We are always afraid to kill things that aren't working so well. And so what's the thing that you might need to have a nice funeral, celebrate that it was a great thing back in 1950, but maybe we don't still need to be doing it. So what are the things that are weaknesses that are sucking the life and energy out of you? I'm sorry, this wasn't a therapy session. Let's go on. Opportunities. What are the opportunities that are out there that if you were to do them, maybe they're not part of the church now, but they're potential kingdom kind of opportunities. Yeah, so I'll give you an example of this for us. So where our original campus is, it's an upper middle class community on the banks of Lake Michigan. We have Whirlpool's world headquarters is located there, so there's a lot of the CEO, the VPs, all the people, a lot of engineering, about 3,000 corporate jobs, but high-level corporate jobs. We've got 2 nuclear plants on either side of our community. We've got a really awesome hospital system. So when you think about all that together, we've got a leadership culture in our community. And just like the person that maybe has some addiction issue or their life's spinning out of control and they don't know where their next meal is going to come to, and they've lost their job and they're struggling and they don't know if they're going to be able to pay the light bill or the mortgage or whatever. There are people that have everything that this world has to offer, and they are lost, and they need Jesus. So think about in our context, there's an opportunity there for us to be Jesus in that context. So we started what was called the Lead Table Series, where we brought in a speaker over a lunch hour, invite people. It was an event where you could invite your unchurched, dechurched person far from God that was your work partner or your boss or whatever. You could invite them into this lunch kind of setting. We'd have a short talk that was some leadership principle that they could readily apply. Anybody in the room, whether you knew Jesus or not, you could apply this principle to your life as a leader, and then to do some networking, because everybody loves networking, do some networking around those tables. As side door evangelism. That was an opportunity that we saw in our context. What are the opportunities that you see in your context? You and the Lord talk about that. And then the last thing, what's the potential threats? What are the factors outside the church? What's going on locally, nationally, even internationally? What's the things that potentially, the trends that could derail you? So for us, just got word recently that Whirlpool is thinking about they're laying off some folks. So that has the potential. So as we're doing our own strategic plan, we're working on our budget. That's an input to think about what happens if a few hundred people get laid off. That's a potential threat for us. What about the election that's coming up and all the turmoil that's gonna happen in our churches? Again, answering the question, what are the potential threats as you do that analysis? Another thing that I think would be really helpful for us as leaders that, again, you can do in the context of you with a small group of leaders, you can do on your own. Again, because what we're talking about, moving from land of talk to the land of do, is, again, something that's been really helpful to us. I don't know if you know what a Venn diagram is. A Venn diagram is just a series of, it's just a way for you to look at how things are related, how they to compare and contrast things, how things are interrelated. So imagine 3 concentric circles. And so let's imagine thinking about, a circle that is all the things that you're good at. Another circle might be all the things, and talking about jobs. And then, so what are the things that you're good at? What are the things the potential jobs that are out there that pay really well? And then the third circle would be things that you love to do. So what you're good at is one circle. What pays really well is another circle. And what you love and you're passionate about is another circle. And where those circles intersect, that's that sweet spot. And that's where you want to find a job. It's not something that pays well that you're not good at. You're probably not going to last very long in that one. Or something that doesn't pay well, but it's something you love and you're good at, and that's a recipe for really struggling to pay the mortgage. So, but where is that sweet spot? So a Venn diagram just as a way to think about how things interrelate. And so I want you to think about a Venn diagram for the kingdom, and there's 3 concentric circles. And the first circle would be what I would just throw out as community needs, to think about what are the needs of the community. And that's, again, we've done some of this work before because you've exegeted the community, so you know what those needs are. And so just think about that. You could list those things, talk about those. If you're with a group, talk about all of those things. What are the needs of the community? And then to think about, okay, in our context, in our church, what are the resources that we have available? And resources are things like your buildings. One of the panelists earlier talked about her 10 acres she had. Oh wow, I'd love to have 10 acres. So land, vehicles, the location where you're at, all those things are the resources that are available to you. And then the other thing are the gospel opportunities. What are those things that if you did them, they would help you to be able, they just have an opportunity to have some, gospel expression. And where, again, you have the opportunity to share Christ with somebody, maybe if all those opportunities. So, and where those 3 circles in this diagram come together is right here in the middle, and that's what you could call kingdom impact. And to be able to try to do the work of identifying that. Let me give you an example. So we had, as I said, we had gone to the community. We'd asked everybody in the community. We'd knocked on doors, and we'd made lists, and we had these community dinners. What would be a blessing to your community? What would be helpful? How can we serve you? And in this little under-resourced community, one of the things that kept coming up to the top of the list was speed bumps. Speed bumps. We need speed bumps. People drive through our community super fast, and we got children, and they're outside because just the community, the kids are outside a lot, and they go to homes. They're just, and parents, they're working, and so their kids sometimes are home alone, and so it was just a dangerous situation that they were afraid that kids gonna get hit or whatever. And so just thinking about that, so that is a community need. And do we have, as a church, the resources to maybe help with some speed bumps? Well, sure, we probably do. We could probably figure out how to. But you know what? There's not a whole lot of gospel opportunities when you're helping put some speed bumps in. So as of yet, we've not that there's anything wrong with helping a community put some speed bumps in their community, but it doesn't because you only have so many resources. It's not the sweet spot. So the sweet spot for us was this idea of a laundromat, because that's they kept saying that as well. So it was a need. Again, they don't have access to a facility that's miles away. Don't have it's well water. It messes their clothes up. There are a lot of, as I mentioned, a lot of the homes are rentals, and so they don't have the washers and dryers. And so it's a community need. Resources. If you were paying attention, who did I say? What's the community that we're in? Whirlpool has its world headquarters. I have people in my church that wake up and every day they talk about washers and dryers. Their whole work world is all about washers and dryers. I've got the VP of this and the director of that in my congregation. So I've got people that I can lean on, that I can talk to. I know the people that are on the Whirlpool Foundation where they've got $1 gajillion that they just kind of dole out to people. And so we've got the resources. And then the really cool thing is, what do you do when you come to a laundromat? You sit there for hours as your clothes are washing. Is there any opportunity maybe to do some Jesus work while people are doing their laundry? We can do Bible studies, and we can do after school programs, and I can teach English as a second language, and I can do blood pressure screenings. I can have the hospital come in and they can do some things with people. I can help people prepare their resumes, and so there are there's scores of gospel opportunities. And so you don't need to create a laundromat. You just need to exegete your community. You need to, again, move from the land of talk to the land of do, and to think about, in this Venn diagram, just one way to help you. It's just a tool to help you to think about what could be as you listen to that still small voice of the Spirit. So let's talk quickly, and the other ones aren't as long as we took with that first one. But the second step would be just to resolve, as we think about these 4 steps. Again, we're trying to get out of the land of talk into the land of do. So we've recognized, so taking all that we've just talked about, thinking about the community, thinking about the history, thinking about the exegeting that community, doing all those other things. So with that in mind, now we resolve what are we going to actually do. So identifying the vision of the land of do. And, it's really important that we don't get, some of us just love to just stay up in the clouds and just talk and vision and dream and all that. But this is where we start to land the plane. We get out of the clouds and begin to think about, okay, what do we actually need now to do? Because we can't do everything. And this is where we resolve, what are we actually going to do? What are the key initiatives? Here's a question to ask yourself. And this is I'm going to give you one way to think about it and the way not to think about it. Here's the question. What are the key kingdom initiatives that will do the most to advance the kingdom in this next ministry season? Now that's different than and it's subtle, but it's different. It's different than asking yourself, what's the most important thing to do? Those two things might be different. And so I would just encourage you to think about, as you're in this resolving phase of identifying the vision of what you're going to do as you move from the land of talk to the land of do. What's the key question? What's the key kingdom initiative that's going to do the most to advance the kingdom, to just please the Father? What's going to do that? And so we have to, you remember before we talked about that the irreducible complexity of the gospel, that we're going to narrow that down. And so if you take those things, so it's 4 things, whatever it is, however you kind of define that. For us, again, it's worship, grow, serve. Some of you are familiar with the Intentional Churches model, and if you're familiar with what they call the Great Commission Engine, good book, good stuff. You can look at that, you can go online, check that out. But in that Great Commission engine, the way they identify those, what they call the pistons of the church that drive the church, that drive the engine of the church, they talk about the catalytic weekend experience, life-changing relationships, and then surrendered living. That's the three things. So whether you use worship, grow, serve, or you use some other variation on that theme, catalytic weekend experiences, life-changing relationships, surrendered living, whatever it is, it's just hard when you just randomly think, okay, God, what randomly do we want to do? It just helps you to just break it down a little more narrowly, to think more specifically, and make sure, because all of us have areas that, I'm an outreach guy. I don't know if you got that vibe, but I love thinking about how to reach that next person for Christ. But there's other areas, so I can't just be, myopic in my focus. I got to think about other things. And so as you think about that, so take those areas, worship, grow, serve, or whatever it is, and then begin to brainstorm what would it look like for us to resolve, again, taking all that information where you were recognizing some things. And so what would you to potentially do? So here's what I would suggest. And again, you can do this as an individual, but I think it's more effective if you do it with a small group. And with that small group, you could, here's the way we do it. You can do it however way, but here's what we do. We put up on a wall, worship, grow, serve, big, Post-it notes or whatever, maybe a dry erase board, whatever. And then you give whoever's there, the group, again, 6 to 12, whoever it is, index cards or big Post-it notes, Sharpie, and just to give the Spirit some time to talk to us. And just ask them one area at a time, start with worship or grow or whatever. And just, for instance, start with worship. And after taking all the inputs that you've done, what are the things that the Spirit is just laying on your heart that could be things that you could do in this next ministry season? Because what's the question? Kingdom initiatives that will advance the mission of the church. And just write down those ideas. And then you collect those ideas, put them up on the wall. And as you put them up on the wall, there's going to be some things, people are going to say some similar things. So you kind of group them together. Some people don't understand strategic thinking and they put weird stuff that you could never do. And so you just politely, oh, that's a great idea. Would have never thought of that. And you move on. Because you might have to clarify a few things that are confusing. So those areas, and you do that for every area. So you've got now, and then I always add a miscellaneous category, because there's always some things that don't really fall in those categories so easily, and so to have that miscellaneous category. So you've done that work, you've kind of thought, what are the potential things, and then what I like to do is to give them, everybody loves stickers, you go with a doctor, wasn't it fun when you were a kid and you got a sticker? So to give people stickers, little stickers, and we use little star stickers, and then we let them get up and say, we're going to give you 3 or 4 votes in each category. And I want you to put this is the way you get to vote. Just put a sticker on the thing that you think is going to move the church forward. What's the Lord saying to you? And so everybody votes and they can put their stickers on where they vote. And so by the end of that, then you get a list of things that are the big master list of things potentially that you could do. And you've got 3 or 4 that you could group, the top 3 or 4 in each area in the miscellaneous category. So for us, again, I've got my little book with me because I had written them all down. And so then we had a master list of the things that we potentially could do. Let me just share a few that came literally off of our list. Leader training for lay people. Start Celebrate Recovery at our St. Joe campus, because we already have it at a different campus. Regularly offer service projects in the community. Develop a culture of invitation. Start a new believers group. Intentionally leverage our preschool, we have a preschool, to reach unchurched, de-churched families. Start a service for individuals with disabilities and families. And so we had this master list, and then I let everybody again have 3 or 4 votes, and asked them to vote for their top 3 or 4. And then that allowed us to rank them from there's 15 on this list, 1 to 15, then we ranked them. And then from there, we took that, and as a senior leader, if you're the senior leader, I'd always say that I feel like because God's put you in a place of authority there, you do have the right to play your I'm in charge and we're not doing that dumb thing that was actually at the top of the list. I've never had to do that in all the years that I've done a similar iteration of a process like this. Always, it's really cool the way the Spirit just seems to lead in that group, and how things and I typically don't even vote, and to see things that, wow, I was thinking about that, and now it's the top thing that we've all agreed to. But then everybody's got that buy-in, and so on that list, you've got that. Then you'll come away with 1 to 2 or 3 things. You can't do 15 things. And even though there's probably 15 good ideas that come out of a process like that, what in the next ministry season over the year, to move from land of talk to land of do, what's the thing that God is saying? And you could take maybe 1 to 3, and then you can kind of move to that next step. And as you create that master step. The other thing I would say is sometimes when you have that group of 15 things, there are some of those that might be so simple that you can just say to one person. Like our preschool director was in that group, and we said to her, you know what, we don't need a whole team around helping to reach unchurched families through a preschool. She was already on that, so we just said, hey, knock yourself out, just make that happen, and she did that. But the other ones, we then put a team around with a point person leader, and then let's talk about, and the third piece, then what I would call in these 4 R's of moving the land of talk, from land of talk to land of do, what we call reacting. And that's where we take, and you could, those 3 things, we always give them a name. Whether it's in this next ministry season, this is an area of concentration for us. We've got these 1 or 2 or 3 areas of concentration. You might call them, Intentional Churches calls them VIPs, Vision Initiative Projects. You can call them BHAGs, Big Hairy Audacious Goals. You can call them WIGs, Wildly Important Goals. Whatever in the world you want to call them. Call them something, put a team around it, and then this next step is where you write some SMART goals to move from the land of talk to the land of do. A SMART goal, very simply, if you don't know what a SMART goal is, it's just a way to write a goal so you can accomplish something, so it's not just nebulous. So you're not just saying, yeah, I want to lose weight, or I want to be healthier, but you don't you don't have any goals around how you actually are going to get healthier. And so if you want to do these things, you need some SMART goals. So what's a SMART goal? Let's just talk about it. SMART goals are specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, time-bound. Many of you are familiar with how to write a SMART goal. Specific is just, it needs to be well-defined, the goal. So if you're, what are those things you're going to do what's the goal that you write around it? It's got to be detailed, it's got to be meaningful. So it's got to be a specific goal, it's got to be a measurable goal. So how are you going to actually know when you've accomplished it? What's the measures help you to stay on track? How's it achievable? As you think about it, you need some things that are going to stretch you, but it's got to be realistic. There's nothing worse than having a goal that you write that everybody knows there's no way in the world we're going to reach 1 million people for Jesus. Well, there's no way that's going to happen. So what's the actual realistic goal for you? What's achievable? And then what's relevant? It should push the mission of the church. It should relate to what, again, Jesus has told us to do. You don't need more busy work. The ministry, the church world, you got enough busy work. What's going to move the kingdom, advance the kingdom? And so it needs to be relevant. And then finally, it needs to be time-bound, a timeline, and time-bound even, what's the start date? And then what's the end date? So we do things typically over a year. So the next year, here's the things we're going to do. And so for us, there was creating that culture of invitation, and it really became the goal. The VIP Vision Initiative project was around evangelism, and so evangelism, prayer, we've done before. So just different things. So encourage you to think about what does that, to write some goals around it, and then as you write the goal, then the next step would be what are the specific things that you want to do? What are the action steps that are going to get you toward that goal? And as you write action steps with those as well, you need to have action steps where you can have some accountability around that. Who's accountable to that? How much is that going to cost? When's that action step that goes back to the SMART goal to help you accomplish a SMART goal? And so that's just all a part of the process. So let's conclude with that final step of refocusing. Again, as I said at the beginning, refocusing is something that often we forget to do. So there needs to be a regular cadence of evaluation and accountability. Whatever you expect, as they say, you need to inspect. So if you're going to move into the land of do, then you need to have this regular cadence of thinking and following back up. And how do you do that? Is that you have in your regular meeting time, you set aside some time where the people that are in charge of those vision initiative projects or whatever you're calling them, that they report out? Is it them giving a report to your council or your board of elders or whatever? But what is the regular cadence of evaluating how you're doing, accountability? We have to hold people accountable. We have to make sure that we don't skip that step. And then to celebrate, that's part of it too, to celebrate when things are going well, to go back and again to continually ask yourself the question, God, is this still what we need to be doing? Is there any tweaking to this? And so that's a part of this refocusing as well. So as I conclude, I want you to just encourage you again, chew the meat, spit out the bones. What is God doing for you? God deserves our best. I just want to encourage you. God deserves leaders that are serious about moving the church, His church, from the land of talk to the land of do. And I just would remind us, we've got a lot of Church of God folks. I know there's others that will probably listen to this as well. But I just would remind us of who we are. We are the Church of God Reformation movement. Let's not forget we're the movement. It's not enough to just do what we always did, hoping for the best into the future. What in our generation, in the spirit of D.S. Warner and others, the spirit of innovation, what is it in our generation? This is our time. We are in charge. And in our time, what are we going to do? What are you going to do to advance the mission of the gospel of Jesus Christ so that we can hear those wonderful, beautiful words from our Savior, well done, my good and faithful servant. Couple resources as we conclude. And I mentioned Intentional Churches. They have a website. They talk about, and a lot of Church of God congregations now are using some of their process. We do it as a church. That's a resource. Will Mancini wrote Church Unique. That's a great book that talks about strategic planning and things. The 4 Disciplines of Execution by Covey. That's another great resource. And let me just go back to what we said at the very beginning, to quote Daniel Boone, to go back to what he had to say. When you're lost in the wilderness, bewildered, no fixed plan will do. You must think, act, and learn your way to safety. Thank you for a chance you've given me to share with you. I hope if there's any way I can serve you, help you out in any way. Thank you for the opportunity. Let me just pray for us as we conclude. Father, thank you for the opportunity as we turn it over to Dr. Will will be here in a second. God, thank you for this opportunity to be here. Pray, God, that you would help the church to listen and to hear your voice so that we can be just obedient to what you're calling us to do in our generation. We love you, Father. Thank you for the privilege of serving and leading. Pray your rich blessing on everybody that listens to this. May your will be done through us. And we pray in Jesus' name.